Excellent. We've got a panel full. We got the stage full of people going to talk about obviously planning the exits, buyers and sellers. Now, the way that we do this, we do it on the podcast. Going to do the exact same thing. Going to do a Twitter bio. Want to know if you're a buyer, a seller, and or both. A little bit of background of yourself. Again, Twitter style, so nice and concise. And we'll start.
Great. Hey everyone. My name is Casey Clark. I help lead corporate development at Talivity, which is a holding company that owns and operates Recruitix, Onward Search, and a couple other brands related to connecting people to jobs. I am representing the buyers, buy side, and so most of my perspective comes from strategic acquirers of recruitment services and recruitment technology businesses, as well as perspective from private equity buyers as well. I work with a couple of private equity firms in addition to Talivity.
I'm Richard Collins. I am currently the co-founder of CV Wallet, who may have heard of earlier. Been in the industry terrifyingly since 1995. I have 3 exits to my name. The first was an ad agency I sold to WPP in 2000. The second I sold to a client in 2010-ish. And people probably know me most from my ClickIQ days, which we sold to Indeed in 2019. So this is my 4th rodeo.
Hi everyone, Paul Daley. Gosh, I sounded a little loud there, didn't I? I've been 20 years in and around talent acquisition, 16 years with CLO. Some of you may know that business started life as OK House in the RPO space. I've been a seller of that business 3 times through 3 different PE businesses. For the last year or so in my time at CLO, I was a buyer. I actually led corporate development and M&A there, and we did 6 deals. I've also been an angel investor for 13 years in HR tech, and I left CLO at the end of October. I'm now doing a lot of work helping scaling businesses in the HR tech space, be it both organic and inorganic growth as well. So that's me.
Hi everyone, Andreea Wade. I was the co-founder and CEO of a company called Opening.ai based in Dublin, Ireland. It was a data science company. We built matching technology that was acquired in 2020 by iCIMS. I'm still in iCIMS. I'm a VP of product strategy. I do partner with corporate strategy. If you have a cool startup, you can ping me. I'm also the chairperson of another recruitment startup. And yeah, I know about AI and recruitment and stuff.
Hi, I'm Roy Jacques, MD for Appcast in the UK and EMEA. For this panel, I'm part of the Appcast global leadership team. So we sold our business to Stepstone in 2019. And a few months ago, we announced the acquisition of Bayard in the US. Prior to the TA industry, I worked in social media, technology, in MarTech, and in PR tech, where we bought and sold 2 companies, respectively.
So a lot of tech.
A lot of tech.
A lot of tech, okay. So all of you sellers, all of you co-founders, founders, when did you start planning your exit? It wasn't from day one, was it?
I think exits are like children. They're never planned and there's never a good time for them. I think... I think I got 4 children. I think that it depends on you as an individual, because I mean, plenty of people start a business and there's a lifestyle element to it, and you never exit, and maybe circumstances change, and that does. But for me, I started a business because I wanted to make money, and therefore, when we started with ClickIQ, I knew exactly who I was going to sell to the day I started the business, and I executed on that. And I've got a pretty good idea who we'll sell this time to. So, you know, I think I don't think you can start it soon enough, frankly, because you have to build those relationships. You have to build a business that is actually sellable. But I think the timing thing is interesting, and every business I've sold, I've never actively gone out to find a buyer. The buyer has come to us. And I think if you put yourself in the right place, those opportunities do present themselves to you on that journey.
So were you actually looking specifically for that brand or a technology that you knew that you were going to sell to? You knew that there was a problem in this product suite and you were going to sell to that, let's say, for instance, type of tech or brand? Or did you know specifically that brand's going to need me?
The latter.
Okay.
I think you solve a problem and then you think about who your technology adds the most value to, and they're the people that you should clearly sell to.
Okay.
I'll try to remember your question. We didn't go to, thinking, day one. I can't believe it worked. Well, yes and no. We were an API company, so we built algorithms, wrapped them in APIs, and sold them. So we always knew that we're going to be part of something bigger if this thing works. But when we were bought, we actually had we didn't go to market to sell, but we had 3 companies interested in us, and 2 of us gave us offers. And funny enough, something that Darryl mentioned earlier, I got your attention, your head was in your phone. One of the offers was nearly double the other one, but it was structured completely differently. We would have gotten less upfront. They wanted us to keep selling the technology as we did, rather than what iCIMS wanted, incorporate us in, and then 18 months earn-out versus 3-year earn-out, yada, yada. But having, and that's something that Adam mentioned as well, having more interest in the loop was great. And once we saw that the market is indicating that they want this technology, we knew that they were either built by our partner. So if these 3, players would do something else because we're not selling to them, then where is our exit? So then once we knew this, then we engineered serendipity, and we engineered, it was like, next time you're in New York, come and let's talk. And I'm like, well, I'm there in 2 weeks. I just made that up. And, so you have to make it work, but it is kind of what you said. It's it happens.
But it was a matchmaking kind of a thing, though, because you said one company wanted you to sell a certain way, and apparently you didn't want to do that. So you had options, which is good, but going into your exit, you knew what you wanted to do, and it wasn't that option A, it was more option B.
100%. And we just knew that this technology made sense integrated into an existing platform rather than trying to sell these APIs left and right. And then also we had more confidence, frankly, in iCIMS, and through their M&A process, we ran through Vista Equity Partners M&A process, so a couple of PE companies own iCIMS, so Vista are known for their black book for everything. So iCIMS were able to communicate and say from LOI, 92% of the deals close, and this is what's going to happen next week or in 2 weeks, and this is our plan. And so we had way more confidence in the success of the whole thing by how iCIMS presented not just what they offer, but what their plan was.
Okay. So Paul, I see your head shaking. You've had some experience around this. Give us a little bit of insights to your planning or non-planning, as Richard said.
I think you start your business from day one being sellable, but you don't know if you're going to sell it. And there are multiple routes and definitions of what people mean by that. For some people, they see it as a way to realize some capital, so a partial exit to a VC or a PE is legitimate. Of course, if it's down the PE route, then you might have some strings attached to your future, so that may not be ideal. People may aspire to a trade sale or a sale to a strategic. That's fine, but you might feel you've kind of left a lot on the table still, because you're obviously potentially giving up your autonomy over your freedom and vision. And it's interesting when I've spoken with founders and entrepreneurs over the course of, say, a decade or more, what they thought was going to be plan A in day one ended up being onto like plan F by the time it came about. But they still had a North Star over, yes, we want the business to be sellable, but of course there's a small matter of things like COVID and wars and other events that kind of get in the way of a great plan. But I think it's knowing that directionally you still want to be sellable is important, but having a level of agility over what your strategic options that present at a point in time may look like. And Andreea, it sounds like you had some of that experience as well in terms of those options when you had them on the table.
So it doesn't always work, and don't cry yourself to sleep in the corner when it doesn't work.
Better summarized than me.
Okay. So Roy, wait a minute, Roy. So no way in hell we thought Appcast was going to get acquired by a German company. Okay, it just wasn't going to happen. So the planning of getting acquired, one thing, but who you actually ended up with, I think surprised pretty much the entire market, which is good, bad, and indifferent. Talk.
An associated story quickly to back up what Paul just said. Pre-tier industry, 2010, working for a Marcoms business, we identified a tiny startup and made an acquisition. So that founder had the notion to found and sell a business and sold it very, very quickly. We integrated it into our business. But the prompt for eventually selling it after we grew it wasn't our desire to sell it. It was the private equity. It was a 7-year itch. We've had you for 7 years. We need to cash out and go and spend our money elsewhere. Go find a buyer. And so we ended up going to a strategic buyer at that time. So it wasn't like a founder's interest. It was a PE forcing function. The Stepstone acquisition. I think with hindsight, and for those that have been around in the industry and certainly in the US for a long time, you would probably know that Stepstone had been out touting the market for years looking for a US acquisition. They regard themselves as a Western Hemisphere company. They were strong, obviously, in Germany, kind of dominant market position. They'd bought Total Jobs and JobSite in the UK, but the US had always eluded them. And as a kind of massive media market in an English-speaking economy and a large economy, it should be a great growth opportunity for them. And they just hadn't found the right business. And they looked and looked and looked. And I think from our perspective, Chris knew when he founded the business. He had a hypothesis for sale. But he didn't know who he was going to sell to. And I think who we sold to eventually surprised him as well. But ultimately and strategically, it was the fit. So Stepstone's hypothesis was US expansion. They needed a vehicle into the US, and we ultimately were that vehicle to the US. It was kind of right place, right product, right time, and it just became a good fit.
Yeah, and then the dominoes fell after that, and we saw a lot of buying. Obviously, like the next day or something like that, ClickIQ went.
It was insane. ClickIQ and Paringo all within a few weeks.
Yes,
it was nuts.
Yes. No, it was like July of that 1 month of that year. Yeah. Okay, so buyers, as Andreea said, build, partner, or buy. How do you make that distinction of what you actually do? Casey, we'll start with you. Yeah.
So part of the role of corp dev is it's a catch-all for all of those things. That all ties into corporate strategy of how do you grow the business? How do you evaluate all of these opportunities out there? How do you decide on either to focus your capital and your internal people on building something versus going out and buying something that's already established? It's constantly evolving and changing. So my experience on the corporate development side is 1 quarter you will be heads down figuring out what is the strategy to build and launch something into a market or into your existing customer base, and the next quarter it almost feels like a 180 where that plan is put on the shelf and the mandate is to go find a company that does this already, because we were going down a very expensive route, and it's probably quicker and just as expensive to go out and buy something. So I would say it's always evolving, and it's always changing, and I think that's natural when you go down the route of talking to a potential company you will buy. You are gathering a lot of really meaningful market insights that would have taken you a lot longer to generate on your own, and those could lead you to the opposite direction of saying, okay, actually, this does make sense to build in-house. So it's really dependent on the team, the resources, and the capabilities you have internally, and obviously the capital, and then the seller's willingness to part and share the vision that you have for that. So that is, I think, by nature, a super wishy-washy answer, but that's,
you said it.
That's my experience.
So Paul, and one of the things I want to add to what you said, Casey, is I think, especially right now, the market is dictating because things are going obviously at less multiples. So you can actually go out and buy cheaper than you could 2-3 years ago, right? So talk a little bit about that. When you're looking to build by partner, are you looking at market trends, and is that one of your key indicators?
So that's yes is the short answer, but there's a lot of sort of hair on this topic. So at Cielo, we looked at 1,700 potential acquisitions. So we spent a lot of time just sort of like screening the market, and meeting people and getting out there. But what we were observing was that a seller's expectation was here, the board's buying expectation was there, and getting across that delta was sometimes a bit of a challenging feat. Now, of course, over the past 6 months, the market's continued to slow, so that delta has got smaller, but at the same time, the market outlook has arguably got worse as well. So that is difficult. But just back to your point of do you build or buy, there is a level of, I would say, arrogance comes in an organization that's been relatively successful. And the Cielo was very successful. So we started about 20 of us. We grew to about 4,000 to become a global business. But there's a genuine belief that you can probably do more than what you can actually do when you're thinking about pivoting into new products or new capabilities. Excuse me. And sometimes the best way to actually get to a conclusion that buy is a better route to build is to have a bit of a failure at the build. And we have had a few attempts, and I'm speaking in the past here, as obviously I left at the end of October, to build something, put a couple of $1 million down on the table to do it, didn't quite get to what you wanted to achieve with it, and then have to go off and buy it anyway. And China was a classic example. So I built and looked after our business in Asia Pacific for many, many years. We had about 8 years trying to actually enter the market there directly. We did that via partners and trying to sort of set up all the infrastructure that's required in a country like that. In the end, we bought. I actually closed the deal for that acquisition on the 28th of February 2020, which turned out to be interesting timing. But nonetheless, we got there, and ultimately it allowed us to actually move the ticket forward on what we wanted to achieve in that market. But it's definitely not a simple answer to a complex question, but hopefully that gives you a bit of context over how we think about it.
I find that a very boisterous, very loud CTO will take you through that first path before you go to the build and fail before. Am I correct? Yeah. Your experience?
Our recent experience.
Yeah.
We maybe a slightly different viewpoint to start with, which is in the buying position, why are you buying? So we couldn't have hoped to have built what Bayard had in short order.
Yeah. Over 100 years of being...
Yeah, 100-year-old business with, Google Gold certification for this. So, well, there's no way we could have built that.
Right.
So then you start to look at buying hypotheses, and you're saying, what is a defined reason for us acquiring a business? Like, what is the business rationale? How does this make sense? How do we make it make sense? Mm-hmm. And so in that particular case, there were lots of reasons that made it make sense. We could never have built that. Or we could, but it would have taken us 50 years.
So literally market conditions at some point, you were going to have to buy a portfolio that just to be able to expand your footprint, right?
Yeah.
Just the market conditions made it so for now.
Yeah, we have grown in the States, as you know, incredibly quickly.
Right.
We have an amazing sales and marketing engine, but you get to a point in growth where to get that incremental growth just gets harder. The market is competitive. Those customers sit potentially with other providers. How do you get really rapid growth? You go and buy it. And so in this case, again, there's various reasons. You buy companies for tech, you might buy them for people, you might buy them for knowledge, you might buy them for customers. In this case, we bought them for all of those reasons.
Yeah. So when we were talking about earlier about Appcast being bought, and there were a bunch of dominoes that happened, one of the biggest curveball dominoes was Recruitix buying KRT. So that was an entirely different market than obviously Appcast buying Bayard. So talk about the indicators then, and was it pretty much the same kind of scenario? It was footprint, portfolio, and really just market penetration?
So we'll relate it back to the buy versus build. I think at that time, Recruitix had been stellar at programmatic job advertising, media management, and was on a really great rise at that point. And when you do a great job for your customers ask, well, what else can you do for me? And very frequently, the employer brand side of the recruitment marketing came up, and Recruitix had been offering that as a solution, but recognized that was not the strength. KRT was an incumbent agency based on the West Coast, had some overlap with Recruitix's customers at the time, but they came at recruitment marketing from an employer branding strength. So that was definitely an opportunistic or a very targeted acquisition where we recognized them as a leader on the employer branding side and wanted to bring them in to further enhance Recruitix's ability. And so it's been a great merger since. They are still known, however many 4+ years later, as KRT. Oh, those guys are really great at employer brand, and they're now just a division within Recruitix. So that was a bit about that.
So that was also a people buy. It was a portfolio buy, but you talk about Mona, you talk about Ryan. I mean, they're leaders. I mean, and they had brands in the industry. Was that a big portion of it, or did you not count on people because they can walk out the door?
So any buyer is going to have different priorities in what they're looking for in a deal. For Recruitix, there's obviously the revenue, the earnings, the customers, all of those things that are accretive to Recruitix after an acquisition. One of the next most important things I would put right next to all those the reasons is the people. And if there is not alignment with the team that you're acquiring with the existing team, it's really not a deal that you want to spend a lot of time going into details on. That was not the case with KRT. The leadership team and the rest of the staff were all incredible, and there was alignment, and this is what we could all become if we were to join together and continue working together. And so that played a huge part in Ryan and Mona buying into that vision and wanting to elevate themselves, elevate the team that they put together with the backing of a larger company like Recruitix. And it's been fantastic since they are still with the organization. They are executive leaders on a much bigger Recruitix team, and so they were able to experience even more upside than I think if they were to attempt it solely on their own.
So, Andreea, how did you know it was the perfect time to sell to iCIMS?
Well, having these 3 different entities interested in us and them saying it was a first strong indicator.
It was like a market validation. It's like, oh shit, we might not get 3 people wanting to buy us again later. We better sell now. Was that?
I mean, absolutely. Don't ignore that. But the way it happened was interesting and eventually made the thing happen. So iCIMS acquired a customer of ours, Jibe. So Jibe today is the CRM and the career site in iCIMS. And Jibe, we're using our matching technology. So iCIMS acquired Jibe, integrated Jibe into the platform, integrated us into their platform. This was a year before they acquired us, and I still remember that day. I went to my co-founder and I said, it's like iCIMS acquired us, but there's just no money. And I kind of had a feel, I kind of started seeing.
Okay, no, quick question, because you were like one of the core I mean, you did the heavy lifting in Jive itself. I mean, as the actual matching engine itself. So,
Yeah.
I mean, you felt like they had to come get you at some point.
Yeah, and to be fair to, I mean, and we were in there. I have a VC friend who one day described us as kind of really like Intel inside, opening inside without us. And we were quite sticky. There we had a lock-in factor. And credit to the Jive founder and CEO and their CTO. They were like, kind of, you have to look at these guys. And then we had two really strong evangelists inside iCIMS, my now boss, Al Smith, the CTO, and the chief strategy officer, Mike Welchak, who pretty much made all the acquisitions that iCIMS ever did happen. So all of that, it just makes sense. It worked out. And yeah, again, having all these, and to be honest, matching was a thing then. It just seemed like the holy grail of industry. You, Daryl, again, you mentioned matching, in your, me listening to you, I was kind of like matching was 5, 6, 7, whatever years ago. There were a lot of startups that started doing that back then. So you could feel it. It was, when we started the company, we felt that we were a little bit early. Mm-hmm. Like, ooh, AI, blah, blah, blah. And people were like, oh, I don't know what that is. Okay. So we were a tiny bit early, but then suddenly we just arrived at the right time.
So do you think that also white labeling and being that sticky piece inside was really the key?
Was everything.
Yeah,
yeah.
You were not detachable.
No, and we were good. I mean, we were very good.
Come on. Richard, was it the right time? Why was it the right time? How did you know it was the right time? Because there's so many founders that just, I mean, again, you get into it and you have to get into that mindset where you have to have that ego where we are going to take over the world. How do you step down and say, okay, we're going to give them the chance to take over the world?
I don't believe I ever stepped away from
Whatever, okay.
I think timing's interesting in that, particularly if you have a technology company. I think what Paul was saying about it helps if the buyers have failed.
Yeah.
And you've got a CTO who's trying to do this stuff, and it hasn't quite gone to plan, and that certainly gives a motivation. And if you, again, back to what Paul says in terms of valuation, as a founder, you think X and buyer thinks Y, and there's a big gap. And that gap is somewhat bridged if they failed and realize they failed and can't make it. So there is a step. For us, timing was a combination of both carrot and stick. When your biggest customer by far says we want to buy you or we'll buy someone else, then
you don't have a choice.
It's tricky. And when I sold my first business to WPP, it was after .com bubble happened. So we were sat in a load of debt. So we were kind of extremely motivated sellers. But equally, then there was an earn-out, and it was a people business. So back to what Casey was saying about the fact that you need to lock in people, particularly in an agency type sell. With technology sell, I don't think there is that same need, but if the buyers see you as a core part of their business and motivated enough, then that gap can be bridged. So I think it's just, I say there's never a good time. It's just pure luck.
Yeah, Paul, your name's been used quite a bit. Do you have anything to say about this?
Don't think so. It's all for me. No, I think there's, definitely timing is a factor, and I think there's always the classic saying of, skate to where the puck's going rather than where the puck is, right? So trying to predict some of that and almost trying to leave some breadcrumbs out for a future buyer to indicate that's where it's going is pretty important. And the formation of Cielo, just to use that case study again for a moment, was partly created through coming together of a North American business called Pinstripe. And in about the 18 months prior to that marriage being consummated, there have been quite a few deals that involved clients across multi-regions and different parts of the world. And there was almost this feeling where if you as an RPO business didn't get your act together to operate globally, you're going to be cut out of the enterprise space. And there have been about 3 or 4 customers that we've partnered together on. And you could see that if we didn't come together And we were Oak-House at the time in Europe, had to find another partner, then all of a sudden they could have kind of been locked out in the cold. So there's almost this feeling of, well, if I don't get married to that person, then, you know, who knows what I might get left with. But again, it's just partly sort of setting some breadcrumbs up and following that path forward and hoping that the thesis that you set out for holds good.
Roy, you guys were really the market leader at the time, and most everybody were surprised that you were sold, not just who you sold to, but that you did sell, right, that Chris sold. Why? What, timing-wise?
We started to get approached. And I think this is maybe, Richard, the point you made earlier. There's a point of recognition where you are growing really quickly. You've got a good reputation in the marketplace, and people start to take notice, and so they come and talk to you. We at the time, there wasn't a plan. We weren't sitting around as a team saying, we need to go and sell our business. But when you start to get approached and, you know, people are coming and potentially offering lots of money, you have a fiduciary responsibility to turn around to your shareholders and say, we've been approached. And really that became the trigger. So, you know, the investors began to think, well, we have an asset here which is obviously worth something. And it just went from there. It just sort of happened.
It just happened. Okay, last round, quick. We're going to call this the rapid round. Just one nugget of information for buyers or sellers. What should they be looking at? What's the key point they should be looking at? Casey, you go first.
So I think for a seller, I think it's a really difficult question, but we got to be rapid here. So for sellers, I think you have to be you need to know what you want to be doing post-sale. So that clarity has to be established from the get-go, so that everyone can be thinking about a potential deal in the same way. And what I mean by that is, are you trying to stay with the business post-sale and continue to grow? And the saying is, do you want to just take chips off the table but still have a stake in the business down the road? Or are you looking for an out and want to transition out after a short period of time post-sale? I think having that clarity at the beginning sets the stage for all the other conversations after that. So that's what I would say is critical for a seller.
For me, it is focus on the deal, not the promises that are made. And I think that's, you know, because that's the only thing that you can rely on. And you don't know what's going to change. And people can say stuff with the best will in mind, but the world changes and you end up sometimes in a place that you don't want to be. So that would be mine.
So this is with a seller's advice lens on. I think, one, if you're selling to a strategic looking for a trade sale, get underneath what that buyer wants to achieve and what their value proposition is of a combination of you coming together with them, because that will ultimately define the price which they can position internally within their business and ultimately to their board. And the better you can understand that, the better you can kind of probably position your own value and therefore price to them. That's one. Secondly, and Darryl touched on this, the selling process is arduous. And I feel really guilty about the hell I dragged some people through for months and months on end, which sometimes, I'm still friends with them, but sometimes, you know, it resulted in no deal, which is pretty bad. And my opening gambit to all of them was on day one, this is going to be a drag. Do not trash the business through the process, because we have had a couple of situations where 3-6 months in, clients were churning, revenue was going down, and all of a sudden, that deal that looked fantastic, when I had to bring it back to the board, didn't look so good anymore. So trying to keep your eye on that longer-term game, don't trash the business is really important. And the third thing I'd say is, if your intent is to stay with the business, and normally there would be a need to stay with through some kind of earn-out anyway, do that with a clear vision over what your value is going to be in that new world, in that new context. I think Adam was talking earlier about the fact that sometimes founders are not great employees, but sometimes you've got to just kind of like work out how you're going to lump it, for want of a better word, and be good enough not to get fired, because probably there's some vested interest in you staying on the right side of, you know, earn-outs and bad lever clauses and all the rest of it. And secondly, you want to bring some value beyond just the economic value that the business thought they were going to achieve through that acquisition. Ultimately, you want these acquisitions to be 1 + 1 equaling 3 rather than 1.8. That's never a good feeling.
Off of that, so Richard, you didn't stay. So give us a little kind of like background, because again, a lot of founders they want to get out there, entrepreneur, and then secondarily follow up. Andreea, you did stay. So I want to hear kind of like reasons behind that.
I think like Adam, I'm somewhat unemployable, if I'm perfectly honest. It probably didn't get off to a good start. When I was giving Chris Hyams, who's CEO of Indeed, he came over to celebrate us doing the deal. And I gave him a lift in the car, and it was the Aston Martin that you go on about constantly. And I love this car. It's just so fucking fast. And I'm driving him to the pub, and I'm impressing him with how good this car is. And I overtake on this country lane, pull out, foot down. Coming around the corner, there's a bus. And I swear, I missed it by that much. I nearly killed the CEO. 3 years later, he never once spoke to me or returned an email again. Not once. So I think it's important to not try and kill the CEO. I also think the issue that I had is that Indeed were very impressed with how authentic we were, apparently. That's what they told us, which basically means we say what we see. And sometimes when you see shit, you say it. They didn't like it because we didn't drink the Kool-Aid. So, and I think that comes back to, again, Adam's point. You want to be the boss and what have you. I think it's a very difficult transition, and you have to be honest, as does the buyer, of what they want from you. And often they're not, because you're trying to do a deal. So you're saying, I definitely want to work for you, and they're saying, we definitely want you to work for us. And actually nobody wants to do that. So I think you should definitely try and be as honest as you possibly can, but equally you have to get the deal done. My experience was 3 years. We stayed on as strategic advisors. There wasn't an earn-out of any sort, but there was a waterfall payment after 3 years. We just had to not get fired, which I scraped through somehow.
Where do I start? We are a successful acquisition. Everyone who knows M&A and has bought companies and yada yada knows that most of them don't really, or a lot of them don't work out, or don't work out the way you think you want them to work out. So, but we are a successful M&A inside iCIMS for different reasons. We were the only kind of API company that they bought, and we build AI for the full platform now out of Ireland. Nobody else has the AI knowledge across the company. Usually, if a company HQ'd somewhere else buys you, all decisions come from there, and you just sort of end up reporting to, people in those geographies and regions and whatever. They kind of kept us the way we were. We're this R&D team that builds for everyone, but no one can really tell us inside a company what to do and how to do it. I don't feel like I have a boss. I feel like I have a colleague. I actually took 7 months off last year. I had to. I actually told them that I'm leaving. And then they said, why? And then I said, I'm burned out. I haven't been away for more than 4 days in about 15 years. And they said, okay, go away for whatever amount of time you require, but come back. So I did go back, and they let me create my own job. And I have no team, I have nothing. I just do random projects right now. And I'm working with the board, and I feel like I'm learning. But I'm also there strategically because it's not the earn-out. They keep giving me stuff, and I keep staying, and yada, yada. But I guess I haven't left. So none of the team have left, which is also kind of unusual. The full startup is still there, and every single person we hired since is still there, except this one guy that I had to fire. So it works. And for now, it works for me. But I've been doing a bit of angel investing. I'm a chairperson in a startup. I think every year since the acquisition, I talk to at least 200-300 startups in a year. So I do the things that I like, and I stay close to interesting people and ideas and yada yada. And I will most likely go again. But for now, this setup with what's going on in the world and everything has worked for me personally.
And you didn't try to kill Al, which was helpful as well.
To be fair, the rest of my team is still there. It's just found.
They didn't try to kill Chris either, okay? Okay, so back to the original question. One concise nugget.
From a buyer's perspective, I mentioned hypothesis for acquisition earlier. And you have to remember as a buyer that if you're buying a company with a load of people in it, they're going to become part of your organization. And so integration of business really rapidly after acquisition is my top tip. Even today, people have said to me, we can't believe how quickly the Appcast acquisition of Bayard has come to fruition in the US market. It was intentional. We knew that integration was the fastest way to make this acquisition a success.
You are pretty tightly partnered with them, though.
Very.
Yeah, so I mean, it was almost like a transition before acquisition.
Well, if you think about the structure of business, finance systems, HR systems, bonus systems, employee holidays, all the things that you have inside a normal business,
right?
You have to get all that dialed in. But secondly, culture. You're bringing, a couple of businesses with a relatively similar number of employees together. The culture was different in both businesses. You can't run a business with two cultures. So we set out right from the very start to make sure that culture was integrated really quickly, that all the processes were, and we got to market really fast with our new product. And that was all by design from the original hypothesis. But what comes with that, if we come knocking on your door and you're interested in us acquiring you, get ready, because all the stuff Daryl talked about earlier with due diligence and the kind of the repositories for all the data, so important.
So have your shit tight. Big applause, everybody. Great panel. I appreciate you guys taking the time.